LeBron James is arguably the second greatest player of all time. He's been a top player in the world for nearly 2 decades and has dominated the NBA for most of the past 10 years, making 9 straight NBA finals, winning 3 NBA championships along with 3 MVP awards in his career. There's no denying how great LeBron is as an individual and as a basketball player. But with the very few problems that come with James and his legacy as a player, one of the biggest that doesn't get talked about enough is the amount of times that the roster he's been on has switched up to cater to exactly how he plays. Whether it's his decision or the team's decision to make these big moves, there's no denying that it happens whenever his team isn't playing as expected. And this is by no means going to be a hate video on LeBron. But we're going to be seeing if one of the biggest knocks on his career is really as big of a deal as some people make it out to be. And we're going to do that by first laying out some facts about just how many teammates he's had over the years. And the first one isn't a good sign for one of the greatest to ever do it. Back in the 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s, teaming up with rivals was something players just didn't do, because guys back then would rather beat the competition than win with them. And as we all know, James teamed up with 2 Eastern Conference stars in Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade in 2010. But that's not the bad part, because that would be this mind-boggling stat. Since joining Wade and Bosh on the Heat, LeBron James has been teammates with at least one player from nearly every single playoff series he's played. If you're not following, let me lay it out like this. James has played in 32 total series since then, and has played with a member of 26 of those teams, including all of his rivals, like the early 2010s Boston Celtics, where he's teamed up with Ray Allen and Rajon Rondo since then, or the Chicago Bulls, where he's teamed with their star in Derrick Rose and Kyle Korver, or even the Indiana Pacers, where he's joined forces with Lance Stevenson and George Hill, or the 2011 Mavericks. Well, he was teammates with Tyson Chandler last year and is now being coached by Jason Kidd. Or how about the 2013 and 14 NBA Finals? Well, he's now teammates with Danny Green this year and has been teammates with him in the past. Or even the 2015 Celtics, where he soon after played with Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder in Cleveland. Or finally, how about the Warriors teams he's faced off against in 4 straight NBA Finals, where he's now playing with JaVale McGee and has played with Andrew Bogut in Cleveland. And you get the point here, he's played with a lot of the competition. And while many of these guys have been role players or weren't the same stars that they were when he faced off against them, it's still a stat that really gets you thinking. Another one is the stat that's been thrown around a lot recently, where when this season starts, LeBron will have teamed up with 8 former first overall picks, far more than any other star in NBA history, with the 8 being Shaq, Joe Smith, Andrew Bogut, Greg Oden, Derrick Rose, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, and now Dwight Howard. I will say though that this stat is deceiving, because while he is going to have played with 2 superstars in both Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, the other 6 have all been busts or just dropped off since they were stars. Which then leads us to our third stat, which is the number of teammates LeBron has actually played with. And it really brings our attention to whether or not he has a problem with players getting traded, him being the GM, and changing his team too much in order to win. Let's start off by listing off a couple of other all-time greats and their teammates for a comparison. Michael Jordan played for 13 seasons with the Chicago Bulls, and we're not going to include the Wizards because those years shouldn't really count, but 13 seasons for Chicago, with a total of 92 teammates overall, which averages out to surprisingly about 7 new teammates every year. But the game has changed and developed since the 80s and 90s, so let's look at someone a little more recent, like Kobe Bryant, who played for a total of 20 seasons in the league and had 134 separate teammates, which averages to about 6.5 new teammates every year. And out of a 15-man roster, that's not too bad. But then we get to LeBron James, who's entering his 17th season in the NBA and has had a shocking 179 different teammates since being in the league, which means that he's had an average of 10 new teammates every single year that he's been in the NBA. And this number is insane if you think about it. Sure, every team brings in a couple of young guys through the draft, but to consistently play with nearly a completely different team every year seems impossible. Now granted, he has changed teams 3 times in his career, which meant 15 new teammates each time. But there's been a countless amount of times that he's caused his team to completely remodel itself in order for him to win, with the most recent being the 2017 Cavs. We can compare this number though to a guy like Kevin Durant, who's currently playing in the NBA, going into his 12th season, and has had 120 different teammates, which surprisingly puts him with the same number of new teammates per year as LeBron. while he's changed teams 2 times in his career, which does make it a little better for LeBron to see someone else on the same pace. And I mean, stars choosing to get off of a team that they can't win with isn't new at all. Because I mean, Oscar Robertson forced his way off the Kings decades ago, and Kareem did the same with the Bucks to get onto the Lakers with Magic Johnson. But more recently, we've seen guys like Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki, and Kobe Bryant stay with their respective teams for their entire careers. So things had really cooled down with guys switching rosters. I mean, even Boston's Big Four was a product of Danny Ainge and Celtics management, rather than these players choosing to play together. So it's clear that Kevin Durant going to the Warriors in 2016, and LeBron James teaming with Bosh and Wade in 2010 were the real catalysts of this current era. But honestly, it goes back even a little further than that, because in 2006, LeBron James became the first superstar player to pursue a rookie contract extension shorter than the maximum he was eligible for in 2006. It was one of the first signs of a young player taking control of their career. Now, one of the reasons James did this was in hopes of teaming up with D-Wade and Carmelo Anthony in 2010, but as we know, Carmelo didn't understand the business side of things, so he took a 5-year deal instead of 3. But the other reason LeBron did this, and still does this today, sparking a trend with players everywhere, is because he understood even back then that the league's salary cap is only going up every season. And if he opts out every 2 or 3 seasons, he'll be able to sign smaller, bigger contracts every time, instead of being locked into a max deal that would have led to him being underpaid in the last few years of his contract. But all of this is to say that this was the other catalyst of player empowerment in the league. And himself and Clutch Sports have led us to situations like we saw with Anthony Davis. And I will say loyalty is a huge thing. I think it's something that we should see more often, like we're seeing with Damian Lillard and the Trailblazers, and supermax contracts that the league have invented to help contribute to this is a good step in that direction. But there's a few layers of questions here that will lead us back to the original point of if LeBron's reputation and career are tarnished by the amount of teammates he's had and what he's had to do to win. The first question is, should players have the power over their career, or should they stay with their team and trust the front office? Which is an easy question, because players should absolutely have the power. As we saw with Isaiah Thomas and DeMar DeRozan, even if a player is completely loyal, a team can make an unexpected decision to change up the roster. Now, it turns out that trading IT and DeMar were good moves, but it goes to show that both sides, players and GMs, always do what's in their best interest. I mean, could you imagine LeBron James staying on the original Cavaliers and waiting for them to bring him a winning roster? Or Anthony Davis waiting for the Pelicans to pull themselves together, which would have never happened? Or even Devin Booker staying on the Suns if things keep up how they have been. The next question is, when players do leave, should they be able to go to a team that automatically makes them a contender? And this one's tricky because the obvious response is that it's fair to team up just to a certain extent. I'm perfectly fine with what we saw this offseason now that anyone can win the championship. Just as long as we don't ever go back to Miami's Big Three teaming up or KD joining the Warriors, but it is something that's always going to be a thread because, for instance, we had Kawhi Leonard considering joining the Lakers. There is something that should be said for guys like Giannis and Damian Lillard if they stay loyal and ever bring their team a championship. I mean, they should be praised that much more. But like I mentioned earlier, not every team's front office is as good as Portland and Milwaukee's have been. And with all of that being said, the final question is, did LeBron James start a problem in the NBA? And has how he carried out his career played a part in hurting his legacy? To where I'd have to say that I think he actually fixed a problem in the league by giving back power to the players. There was no one better to do this in the face of the NBA, and I think it's great for all the players that it happened because we're seeing the effects of it in every aspect of the league. Just for example, when Kevin Durant signed a 1-year deal with a 1-year player option with the Warriors, or how Kawhi Leonard just signed a 3-year deal with a 1-year player option with the Clippers. This is a power that players should have and should have had a long time ago. As for his personal career and reputation though, I'm trying to stay on the good side of LeBron fans because I may have said some things in the past that might not have put me there, but you gotta think that he has to lose some credit for all the stats that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video, as well as for teaming up with all of the stars that he has. Don't get me wrong, his entire career has been one of the best ever, and the 2016 championship is legendary. But for teaming up with Bosh, Wade, and Ray Allen in 2012, and getting Miami's entire roster changed to exactly what he wants, with a big man and shooter surrounding him at all times, especially because he was the only one doing this at the time because he started the trend, and for teaming up with 2 stars in Cleveland right after, and getting the entire roster traded when things didn't work out. and now teaming up with the best power forward in the league in Anthony Davis. There's no way it can go unaccounted for. If he was just a regular player or a regular superstar, then sure, it wouldn't be as bad. But since people are putting him in the greatest of all time discussion, and he's rivaling Michael Jordan for that spot, you'd have to think that that comes up as a problem in the discussion. And like I said, this is in no way hate on LeBron. I mean, the moves himself and his teams made back then have really become just what's normal in today's league. But it seems like hurting his own personal reputation is the sacrifice he made for revolutionizing players having power in the NBA, which is really bigger than a lot of things he could have done on the court and shouldn't go unnoticed. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.